Namaskar.
ॐ सहना भवतु सहनो भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहे तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहे ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः।
Namaskar and good evening to all of you. It's a great pleasure to welcome you all to today's edition of Vimarsh. And this is Professor Arvind Sharma's talk on Hindutva and comparative religion. And I'm also grateful to Dr. Anirban Ganguly, who has accepted our request to deliver special remarks after Professor Sharma has spoken. Professor Sharma is known to you. He had given in May his first talk on Hindutva, and since then we have had several roundtables with him. And this is the fifth in the series in which different dimensions of Hindutva have been explored by Professor Sharma, and several scholars have participated in these discussions. So this is the concluding part of that, concluding lecture of that series. Professor Arvind Sharma is Burke's Professor of Comparative Religions in the School of Religious Studies at McGill University in Montreal, Canada. And he has also taught in the various universities and colleges and universities in the United States, and is author of several books on religion, and you may have seen those books. And he was formerly of the Indian Administrative Service in, I think, 62 batch, if I'm not mistaken, 62 batch, and then he made a shift to religion. That's a great, I think it's almost a jump. So, but he has been through his researches, writings, etc., informing us about the deeper meanings of religions and the comparisons between different religions. And in this series, he has explored, as I said, Hindutva and its various dimensions. Dr. Anirban Ganguly is the chairman of Dr. Shyama Prasad Mukherjee Foundation. He is a member of the National BJP Executive Committee. He is a scholar of civilization, history, politics, and culture, and he was a member of Central Advisory Board of Education. He has a PhD in education from Jadavpur University, Kolkata, author of several books. He has had his early education at Sri Aurobindo International Education Center, Puducherry. He is a member of the governing board of Auroville Foundation as well as member of Vishwa Bharati Sansad Shantiniketan. Now, being a concluding lecture of this series, I must just mention, and I think Professor Sharma will talk about in his concluding remarks, summarize the lectures. But we have covered several themes: Hindutva and secularism, Hindutva and caste, Hindutva and history. And today's talk will explore Hindutva and comparative religion. I think today morning I was just glancing through this very encyclopedic book written by Arvind Nilakandan on Hindutva, and it's about 800-900 pages book, extremely well researched, referenced, documented, and covers huge. I think it's one of the and it's come out only recently. There is one chapter in that book, I think it's the last chapter, and I thought I'll just mention a point just to flag this with you. You see, this question arises from, what is Hindutva, where is it going, etc., which we have discussed in the earlier chapters. But Hindutva cannot exist in isolation. How does Hindutva relate to other religions? Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism, Islam, Christianity, because we have followers of substantial number of followers of these religions living in this country. So Arvind Nilakanthan talks about the Samanvaya and the tradition of Samanvaya he talks about, and he says that this tradition was initiated by Ramakrishna Vivekananda tradition. He states that the very diverse nature of Hindu historic cultural substratum makes it mandatory for Hindutva to harmonize the diverse Indic traditions, even ones with mutual conceptual oppositions, into an organic unity. So whether that's a future direction for Hindutva or that's already happening, etc., something that I think we should discuss. And he says that it also makes it impossible for the emergence of a specific kind of theocratic fundamentalism, as is the case with theocratic state that is typical of Islamist, Christian, or Marxist varieties. So I think we need to discuss what is this Samnavaya, because you have also talked about the pluralism in Hindutva, etc. So I think these concepts need to be discussed in detail, and because otherwise there is a lot of views that are being expressed, and they often create confusion. So one reason why we did this series was that an academic like you, we need to have first is academic discussions, so that first we, in the academic circles, in an academic discourse, we flesh out what are the questions, what are the sources, what is the documentation, what's the history, etc. So I think in that sense, this has been a very welcome series. And now I request Professor Anil Sharma to take the floor.
Namaste. Thank you, Arvind Gupta ji. I would like to begin by thanking the Vivekananda International Foundation for providing me with this opportunity of delivering these lectures and for providing the august audience constituted by the patrons of this institution. What I have to say today, I'd like to do in two parts. In the first part, I will deliver my prepared lecture on Hindutva and comparative religion. And after that, I would spend a few minutes in summarizing the conclusions we reached in our earlier presentations and how they might be implemented. So I start now on the formal presentation of the topic, Hindutva and comparative religion. I take it that all of you can hear me? Yeah, good. Now, I would like to begin this lecture by asking a question. Is it possible to claim, as we look around at the India of our times, that this India, which we see, represents the fulfillment of someone's dream? Quite obviously, it does not represent the fulfillment of the dream of Mahatma Gandhi, too violent, or that of Pandit Nehru, not sufficiently secular, or that of V.D. Savarkar, not sufficiently Hindu, or that of M.N. Roy, the leader of the Communist Party, not communist. Does it realize anybody's dream? And if so, whose dream does it realize? After all, dreams are not lies. The answer may surprise us. The India we see around us comes closest to embodying the dream of Thomas Babington Macaulay. Lord Macaulay concluded his address to the British Parliament on July 10, 1833, with the following words. I quote him now. The destinies of our Indian Empire are covered with thick darkness. It is difficult to form any conjecture as to the fate reserved for a state which resembles no other in history and which formed by itself a separate class of political phenomena. The laws which regulate its growth and its decay are still unknown to us. It may be that the public mind of India may expand under our system till it has outgrown that system, that by good government we may educate our subjects into a capacity for better government, that having become instructed in European knowledge, they may, in some future age, demand European institutions. Whether such a day will ever come, I know not. But never will I attempt to avert or to retard it. Whenever it comes, it will be the proudest day in English history. To have found a great people sunk in the lowest depths of slavery and superstition, to have so ruled them as to have made them desirous and capable of all the privileges of citizens, would indeed be a title to glory, all its own. The scepter may pass away from us. Unforeseen accidents may derange our most profound schemes of policy. Victory may be inconstant to our arms, but there are triumphs which are followed by no reverse. There is an empire exempt from all natural causes of decay. These triumphs are the pacific triumphs of reason over barbarism. That empire is the imperishable empire of our arts and our morals, our literature and our laws. End of quote. In his famous minute on education, Lord Macaulay dreamed of creating a class of people in India who were, to quote him, Indian in blood and color, but English in taste, in opinions, in morals, and in intellect. End of quote. And here we are, you and I, Indians in blood and color, but English in taste, in opinions, in morals, and in intellect, and maybe a little American too. There is one part of his vision of India, however, which Macaulay did not include in his public address, as it might have been impolitic to do so. Macaulay was a Christian evangelist. Already at the age of 8, he had written a convincing essay on the desirability of converting heathens to Christianity. In the famous minute, he wrote that, and I quote, "We have abstained, and I trust will always abstain, from giving public encouragement to those who are engaged in the work of converting natives to Christianity," end of quote. But this was his public position. His private opinion was reflected in the hope which he conveyed to his father in a letter that India would soon be converted to Christianity. Excuse me. He wrote to his father on October 12, 1836, from Calcutta. I quote, "It is my firm belief that if our plans of education are followed up, there will not be a single idolater among the respectable classes in Bengal 30 years hence. And this will be effected without any efforts to proselytize, without the smallest interference with religious liberty, merely by the natural operation of knowledge and reflection. I heartily rejoice at this prospect." End of quote. As the diplomat Pavan Verma has noted, this was the one aspect of Macaulay's dream which has not been realized. The dominance of the English language in India, the fact that we are having this discussion in English, of a constitution drafted in English, of science and technology being taught through English, all these would represent for Macaulay the triumph of reason over barbarism. A Christian India would also have represented for Lord Macaulay a similar triumph. This is the one aspect in respect to which Macaulay's dream has not been fulfilled. India has not embraced Christianity. Now we see the real significance of the fact that the Hindutva movement focuses on Hindu religion and culture. It is the only thing which has still kept India Indian. Through all the breathtaking vicissitudes of history, it should therefore not come as a surprise that the last lecture in the series should take up religion for further consideration. Macaulay's great failure may well turn out to be India's, that is Bharat's, great success. The rest of this lecture will be devoted to an examination of a basic distinction proposed in Hindutva literature between the religions of Indian origin and those religions which did not originate in India. It will examine this distinction through the prism of comparative religion, or more broadly, that of world religions. The Constitution of India and secular liberal discourse in India does not seem to distinguish between religions which originated in India and which entered it from outside India. To them, all of these are just religions, be it Hinduism or Christianity. Allow me to clarify the point involved here. 4 religions are usually considered as having originated in India, namely Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and Sikhism. As distinguished from these 4, those religions which are present in India but did not originate in India are Judaism, Zoroastrianism, Christianity, and Islam. It is striking that neither Hinduism, as popularly known or understood, nor secularism attach much significance to this distinction, but Hindutva does. I would now like to argue that this distinction is profoundly consequential from the point of view of comparative religion, as against those who do not see the distinction between the various religions present in India as possessing any particular significance. At one level, this distinction between the religions which originate in India and those which don't could be considered merely geographical. However, it acquires an ideological character at the hands of V.D. Savarkar. Savarkar draws a sharp distinction between those religions which originated in India and those which did not. He defines a Hindu in his famous tract on Hindutva as one who is a follower of any of the following four religious traditions: Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and Sikhism. On the basis of the following two criteria introduced by him for being a Hindu, namely, that one, a Hindu is one who looks upon the land stretching from the Sindhu or Indus River in the west to the oceans as his or her fatherland, Pitribhumi. And two, who also looks upon this land as his or her holy land, Punyabhumi. If we apply these criteria to the various religions present in India, then it becomes clear that while the followers of all the religions present in India may regard India as their fatherland or motherland, not all of them could be said to regard India as their holy land. For instance, the holy land of the Jews is Jerusalem, not in India. That of the Zoroastrians would be in Iran, probably, not in India. That of the Christians would be in Jerusalem, not in India. And that of the Muslims would be in Mecca or Medina, not in India. This distinction carried the implication for V.D. Savarkar that the land of India truly belonged only to those for whom it was both their fatherland and their holy land. I now venture to suggest that this formulation needs to be revisited seriously in our times from at least two perspectives. The first is provided by the question: to what extent can we still describe India as the fatherland of the Hindus? V.D. Savarkar published his work in 1923 at a time when India had not been partitioned. At that time, one could regard the whole of India as the motherland, or as Savarkar might prefer, the fatherland of the Hindus. But can one still do so after the partition? The foundational texts of Hinduism are the Vedas. The Vedas were revealed in a part of India, the bulk of which now constitutes Pakistan. So now we find ourselves in this anomalous situation in which the sacred land of the Hindus, the Ved Bhumi, is no longer a part of India we are living in. This point could be parried by arguing that Savarkar believed in an undivided India, or Akhand Bharat, and that the followers of Hindutva continue to do so. The point should not be taken lightly. The ashes of Godse, the assassin of Mahatma Gandhi, are still preserved in an urn so that they can be immersed in the Indus River after it has once again become part of India. As recently as a decade ago, Sri Ram Madhav unapologetically defended this Hindutva position at no less a place than the Oxford Debating Union. There remains, however, the chastening geographical fact that some of the very regions where Hinduism's foundational texts were revealed are no longer part of India as we know it. Similarly, the birthplace of Guru Nanak, the founder of Sikhism, namely Talwandi, where he was born in 1469, now lies in Pakistan. The fact of partition, therefore, seems to compromise, at least to a certain extent, the claim that India is the holy land of the followers of Hinduism and Sikhism. We now turn to the second perspective, which emerges when we ask the question: is it correct to say that India is not a holy place for Judaism, Zoroastrianism, Christianity, and Islam? Let us begin with the case of Judaism. It is true that the holy land of the Jews is Israel. India, of course, cannot compete with Israel in holiness, even if it is acknowledged that the Jews have been present in India ever since the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 BC. I beg your pardon, 70 CE. However, one needs to recall that one of the first acts of the Israeli Knesset, the Israeli parliament, was to openly acknowledge and thank India for being the only country in the world where the Jews were not persecuted. It then becomes possible to suggest that although India may not be the holy land of the Jews, India does seem to occupy a special place in the Jewish imaginary. To turn next to Zoroastrianism, it may have come to India from Iran, but the holy places of the Zoroastrians are now found in India. Their sacred fire has been burning continuously in Udwara in Gujarat ever since their arrival. They have their sacred seminaries in this land, but they also have their towers of silence. May it not be true, in some sense, that the Zoroastrians must also belong to India, especially given the affiliations, the affinities between the early sacred texts of the Zoroastrians, the Avesta, and the Vedas. The relationship is so linguistically close that one could produce a Vedic recension of the Avestan texts. However, while one might admit that Judaism and Zoroastrianism could thus be brought in some kind of a semi-sacred, if not a sacred relationship to India, one might yet feel that this might not be possible in the case of Christianity and Islam. Nevertheless, one needs to examine their cases closely. There is the persistent Christian belief that Saint Thomas lived and died in India, and that the so-called Martoma Church traces its very existence to this belief. Thus, even if we dismiss the various accounts of the missing years of Jesus' life as having been spent in parts of India, such as Kashmir or even Orissa, as far-fetched, we cannot ignore the fact that, at least according to Christian folklore, one of the intimate disciples of Jesus Christ came to India and died here. It is true that his dying in India did not prove as consequential in the subsequent history of Christianity as the death of St. Paul in Rome. But it certainly entitles Christians to consider India, if not the Holy Land, then as a Holy Land. The body of Saint Xavier is preserved in Goa and is a place of pilgrimage for Indian Christians, certainly for Indian Catholics. Whatever views may have of the manner in which he conducted his missionary activities within India. So in these ways, Christians could also consider India as their holy land, if they so wished. We come next to the case for Islam. The world's largest Islamic gathering is surely represented by the Hajj in Mecca. But the world's second largest Islamic gathering is held at a place called Tungi, located in Ghazipur, Bangladesh. One could quibble that Bangladesh is a separate country, but then one would have to remember that Hindutva believes in Akhand Bharat. The mausoleums of major Sufi figures are found all over India. It would be hard not to consider the resting place of Muhyiddin Chishti in Ajmer, Rajasthan, as a holy shrine. Yes, it is true that the more puritanical wings of Islam do not approve of the veneration of the holy places of saints, but it cannot be denied that it is a popular practice in Islam. In fact, there exist religious tourism circuits of Sufi holy places in India, just as we have religious tourism circuits of certain holy places within Devbhumi, that is, Himachal Pradesh. There is also the pan-Indian circuit of the Char Dhams, or the four holy sites represented by Badrinath, Dwarka, Puri, and Rameshwaram. There is even a hadith according to which the Prophet experienced cool breezes coming from India. In fact, one of Khadija's children from the previous marriage bore the name of Hind because the word Hind or India stood for something pleasant and positive in the Arab imagination. There is also the account of the conversion of a ruler from Kerala, Cheruman Perumal, to Islam within the lifetime of the Prophet. He is said to have witnessed the miracle of the Prophet in which he split the moon into two, which led him to travel all the way to Arabia and embrace Islam. The Cheruman Juma Mosque in Kodulangur, Kerala, which was constructed during the lifetime of the Prophet, is reputed to be the second oldest Muslim mosque in the world. It is clear, therefore, that if the Jews, the Zoroastrians, the Christians, and the Muslims of India wanted to stake a claim that India was a holy land, if not the holy land, for them also, such a claim would have to be taken in all seriousness. Therefore, the assumption that India is the holy land of only the followers of Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and Sikhism is not as unassailable as one might have thought. And likewise, the prospect of India being a holy land for the Jews, the Zoroastrians, the Christians, and the Muslims may not be as remote as one might have imagined. I will therefore suggest that we should revisit the distinction. I will therefore suggest that we should revisit the distinction drawn between the religions of Indian origin and those which entered it from outside, and seek the distinction between the two, not in the geographical location of the places sacred to them, but in the structure of their doctrines and practices. We could take the first step in this direction by noticing that Hindutva thinkers do not seem to have as much of a problem with the presence of the Jews and the Zoroastrians in India as minorities, as they have with the presence of two other minorities, namely the Christians and the Muslims. This raises the question, if all these religions, Judaism, Zoroastrianism, Christianity, and Islam, are of foreign origin, then why is the Hindutva imagination more exercised about the last two than the first two? The reason is not far to seek. Christianity and Islam are proselytizing religions. Judaism and Zoroastrianism do not proselytize, nor does Hinduism. It might not be unreasonable to suggest that Hindutva does not perceive Judaism and Zoroastrianism as problems because they are non-proselytizing religions like it. This then seems to suggest that the distinction drawn by Hindutva thinkers among the religions of India between those which originated in India and those which did not could perhaps be more convincingly framed on doctrinal rather than geographical grounds. We may now extend the range of our discussion to recognize the fact that many other religions of the world are also non-proselytizing. This suggests that the distinction drawn by Hindutva thinkers is capable of being extended beyond the religions of India to the religions of the world, hence the title of the talk. The following religions of the world, for example, could be described as non-proselytizing: Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism, Judaism, Confucianism, Taoism, Shinto, and the tribal religions. The following religions of the world could then be described as proselytizing: Christianity and Islam. The classification may be neat, the classification just made may be neat, but needs to be nuanced. A case could be made that Buddhism is also a proselytizing religion because it is spread through missionary activity. However, when one converts to Christianity or Islam, one severs one's links with the previous religious tradition one belonged to. There is no such insistence in Buddhism. Actually, during Buddha's own lifetime, the Buddha allowed two prominent members of the Jain community to become his followers only after they had explicitly assured him that they would continue to patronize Jainism after becoming his followers. Case of Singh, General Singh and Upali. In this sense, we may be justified in describing Hinduism as a non-proselytizing religion, although a missionary one. It is also true that some religions, which we have described as non-proselytizing, may have been proselytizing religions during some periods of their history. Judaism is said to have been an actively missionary religion during the early years of the Christian era, but it has not been so for the past several centuries. Similarly, Zoroastrianism may have spread through the missionary activity of the prophet Zoroaster at an early stage in its history, during which it could be said to have been a proselytizing religion. This, however, is certainly not the case in recent history. The present classification is based, therefore, on the contemporary religious reality in relation to these religions. As long as we are talking of contemporary times, we cannot ignore the role of Marxism in the context of the contemporary religious reality of the world. Should we then not also include Marxism in our list of religions? And that too as a proselytizing religion. The issue is a delicate one because religions typically believe in a transcendental dimension to life, which Marxism rejects. Marxists may protest at Marxism being categorized as a religion. However, if the Hindu thinkers believe that they are a dharma and not a religion, and yet Hinduism is labeled as such in contemporary discourse, especially by Marxists, then Hindus could return the compliment and describe Marxism too as a religion, even if Marxists rejected this description. After all, it does share the four crucial features of the Abrahamic religions. Marxism is conclusive, it is exclusive, it is separative, and it is competitive, terms we discussed in the first lecture. It thus is not only functionally a religion, it is also a proselytizing. Hindutva for our times would therefore be more faithful to the contemporary religious reality if it, one, based the division among the various religions of India, not on geographical but on doctrinal lines, on the basis of whether they are non-proselytizing or proselytizing, and two, included Marxism within the category of religion. In fact, one could even argue that this division is more in keeping with Hindutva ideology itself than the division of the religions of India based on native or foreign origin. After all, Hindutva's unhappiness with Christianity and Islam, and Marxism as well, seems to be really based on their proselytizing character. Since proselytization involves conversion, we must therefore examine the nature of conversion and the precise nature of Hindutva's objection to it. The point needs to be pursued very carefully. Conversion can be of two kinds, internal and external. Our inner lives can be changed by an encounter with a saint, by personal experience, even by encountering a passage in the scriptures. But this change in our life is our conversion to a religion, our own religion, not the conversion of somebody else to our religion. If we call this first kind of conversion internal conversion, then the second kind may be called external conversion. In external conversion, one converts someone who does not follow one's own religion to one's own religion. In internal conversion, one aligns oneself more thoroughly with one's own faith. Proselytization obviously involves only the second kind of conversion. An objection can be raised at this point. When we question conversion, are we not interfering with a person's freedom to convert to any religion? A person should be free to convert to any religion one wants to. At this point, one needs to distinguish between a person's right to change his or her religion and somebody else's right to ask someone to change their religion. A person's right to change his or her own religion and somebody else's right to ask him or her to change his or her. Let us refer to the first as voluntary external conversion and to the second as induced external conversion. When one talks of questioning conversion, or even sometimes banning conversion, one has only induced external conversion in mind. The importance of this point needs to be highlighted. My right to change my religion should not be confused with somebody else's right to ask me to change my religion. These two rights are not symmetrical. My right to change my religion is virtually absolute. But the same cannot be said of somebody else's right to ask me to change my religion. That person asking me to change my religion could be doing so from ulterior motives, or at least from mixed motives, and may even be deeply misinformed about the nature of my religion. What the banning of conversion would achieve is to prevent somebody else from asking me to change my religion, on the ground that it is the other person's human right to do so. This is the problem. It is this claim which is denied by the prohibition of conversion, that somebody else has the right to ask us, and not anyone's right to change one's own religion, should one wish to do so out of one's own free will. The problem is that the proselytizing religions, when they engage in trying to convert someone, claim, they have done so explicitly in the Lausanne Covenant, that it is their human right to do so. This position can clearly not be accepted by the follower of a non-proselytizing religion, because it would mean that a follower of a non-proselytizing religion must always be at the mercy of the proselytizing religion. It was perhaps for this reason that Mahatma Gandhi openly declared, I quote him now, if I had power and could legislate, I should certainly stop all proselytizing. End of quote. I am now ready to conclude. And my conclusion is that Hindutva for our times should try to make Mahatma Gandhi's suggestion a reality. If all religions are valid, as you believe, then it is not necessary to change. And if it is not necessary to change, it is necessary not to change. Thank you. Part of presentation. The lecture just delivered on Hindutva and comparative religion concludes the series of 5 lectures on Hindutva for our times. What were these lectures trying to achieve? If Hindutva stands for Hindu self-assertion, then these lectures explore the recommended directions such self-assertion should take. The first lecture was titled Hindutva and Religion, and it demonstrated how the use of the English word religion instead of dharma distorts the Indian religious reality. Dharma allows for multiple religious identities, a possibility not reflected in the word religion. As a result of this, the religious reality of India is being unduly fragmented by the use of the word religion. The solution to this problem may be surprisingly simple. What one needs is an executive directive from the government that people are free to indicate their religious affiliation as including more than one religion during the census operation. Wide publicity should also be given to this provision among the people so that they no longer feel inhibited in doing so. Such is already the case in Japan. The second lecture was on Hindutva and secularism, and it reached the conclusion that pluralism, Nana Dharmata, rather than secularism, Dharma Nirapekshata, would be the right word to encapsulate the proper relationship between the state and religion from an Indian point of view, not just an Indic point of view, but also from an Indian point of view. When we think of Akbar and other figures who all promoted religious pluralism. The word, beg your pardon, this would require an amendment in the preamble of the Indian Constitution, and that could be left for the future. However, although the words pluralism and secularism are not synonyms, and this was the burden of that paper, current public discourse in India uses them interchangeably. One could therefore promote plural perspectives even when discussing secularism, given this fact. The third lecture was on Hindutva and caste. It concluded that the real source of discrimination in modern India is not caste, but linguistic proficiency in English. And the revolutionary zeal directed towards fighting caste oppression should properly target linguistic oppression in India based on the dominance of English. As a first step in this direction, all candidates appearing in the exams conducted by the UPSC could be required to pass a test in their own mother tongues before they become eligible for the formal UPSC exams. The fourth lecture on Hindutva and history concluded that Hindutva should take issues of historical justice seriously. A beginning could be made in this direction by compensating women and Shudras within the Hindu community for the historical injustice to which they were subjected by denying them access to the Vedas. This could be achieved by providing them with free education of all kinds and free medical assistance through the Hindu temples. In order for this to happen, Hindu temples need to revert to the control of the Hindu community. According to one calculation, there are around 900,000 temples in India, out of which 400,000 are under government control. This is in direct violation of the principle of secularism on which the Indian Republic claims to be founded. This is really astonishing. The fifth lecture focused on Hindutva and comparative religion and concluded that if India was to be true to its religious genius, then proselytization should be banned, as urged by Mahatma Gandhi. The point of the ban is not that one cannot change one's own religion if one wants to, but that no one should be asked by anybody, directly or indirectly, to change one's own religion. Legislation along these lines is already in place in several states in India. It needs to be expanded to cover the whole country. Some members of the audience felt, during the course of these lectures, in my conversation with them, that some of the suggestions might be impossible to implement. I would like to address this issue in my final remarks. If we consider some of these suggestions impossible to implement in view of the political climate of the country, then we ought to recall the following conversation between Swami Vivekananda and Pauhari Baba. After the passing away of his guru, Ramakrishna Paramahans, in 1886, Swami Vivekananda became a renunciant or sannyasi and undertook a tour of the country. In the course of this trip, he visited Faizabad in Uttar Pradesh and spent some time with a local spiritual figure known by the name of Pauhari Baba. His name means someone who lives on air. He had earned this reputation because no one had ever seen him consume food. Swami Vivekananda asked Pauhari Baba a $1 million question. Perhaps we could call it a $1 billion question now after inflation, right? The question was, how does one achieve the impossible? Pauhari Baba said, by making the means the end, and the end the means. By making the means the end, and the end the means. So here we have the answer to our question, if we can decode it. This might seem too cryptic a conclusion for this series of lectures, but there again, what is cryptic may also be prophetic. Thanks for the privilege of your time. Okay.
I think that was a befitting end to the series. Very thought-provoking questions, a lot of food for thought. But today we don't have a time to discuss very much. In fact, we are waiting now for Chandrayaan-3 to land successfully on the moon, and that will take us. Yes, impossible. So let me request now Dr. Animal Dongri to make his comments.
It's a very difficult proposition because I think really a tribute to your spirit of Hindutva that you have postponed for the time being, looking at Chandrayaan and have come to VIF for this discussion. So I must salute your spirit, your commitment to Hindutva. But obviously, Chandrayaan is the collective crystallization of our aspiration to civilization and the statehood, nationhood. And it's a symbol of that. So I'll be very brief because I think 5:30 is the landing. The landing starts at 5:30 and concludes by 6. So just about a few minutes. I'll not. I'm someone who has been reading Professor Arvind Sharma for many years, and to be able to make sense of what he says, or to be able to respond to what he has said, would need a lifetime of study as he is or as he has done. I would just first at the onset guide you to a very interesting book of his, The Ruler's Gaze, a study of British rule over India from a Scythian perspective, 2017, HarperCollins. And what is very interesting is there's an entire chapter, I think he's the only one, who's discussed the Aryan invasion theory at the backdrop of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. And it makes for very interesting reading. For those of you who would like to enter that dimension, I would highly recommend that book. And Professor Arvind Sharma says, and I don't know how many of you have really read, he says that as early as 1946, if not earlier, Dr. Ambedkar had challenged comprehensively the Aryan invasion theory. Why am I referring to this? Is because Hindutva has constantly grappled with this superimposed theory that has been attempted by the religio-Marxists over the last 40 years in trying to impose it on us. And he writes, it is a matter of further surprise that little attention has been paid to Dr. Ambedkar's erudite critic. What is more, the regnant paradigm is now being intellectually challenged by the Hindutva forces in India. And yet Ambedkar's work has attracted little attention, even though it anticipates this new questioning, even some of its argument by more than 50 years. And still more surprising is that Western scholarship, which is generally supportive of the Dalit cause and the Dalit point of view as expressed by Ambedkar, has sedulously ignored it. Even Ambedkar's followers seem content merely summarizing his views en passant. So I think when we are discussing Hindutva and comparative religion, the main challenge in India is that nobody allows you to compare. Post-independence, there were no departments of comparative studies of religion ever instituted in Indian universities. They didn't allow you to compare. Yes, they would heap one-sided analysis and abuse on Hindu and Hindutva, but the moment you tried to compare, you were clamped into silence, a sort of an academic apartheid. Now, Professor Sharma makes very interesting points here. In fact, listening to his 5 lectures, I think you'll find all of it in Swami Vivekananda. I mean, whether it was caste, whether it was secularism in a sense, whether it was conversion, all of it, Swami Vivekananda has really discussed extensively. And therefore, one can easily say that he was the first, one of the greatest scholars of comparative religion and Hindutva in his time. Now, when he spoke about Macaulay's India, no, I think we are moving towards becoming Shivaji's India, quite certainly. And I think we can really have that kind of a perspective. But I found it very interesting. And when he was discussing Macaulay, right here, sometime I had written a decade ago a paper where I had mentioned Macaulay. And at Thomas Pinay, I discussed Thomas Pinay's right from his letters of Thomas Macaulay. Macaulay talks about the empire of the mind. And Charles Trevelyan, who preceded Macaulay on his Education for India, speaks about the natives' summit of ambition is to resemble ourselves, is to resemble us. So I think when Professor Sharma speaks a very beautiful, a very perceptive description that he has given as only he can, Hindutva is Hindu self-assertion. I think that empire of the mind, Macaulay's empire of the mind, is being repeatedly challenged at various levels today. And that challenge is visible, and that challenge is expressive, and that challenge has manifestations. Very briefly, because Chandrayaan is also approaching the moon, and Professor Sharma has himself answered that point. My point was that yes, do the proselytizers in Christianity and Islam, will they accept India as the Holy Land? We have no problem. Please do accept India as the Holy Land, but will they accept? And it was in 1967 in the Lok Sabha, a fantastic debate in which MC Chagla as the education minister and Dr. Ram Manohar Lohia, then elected to the Lok Sabha as a socialist member, they discuss and they make fun of and they completely demolish UNESCO's and Pakistan's attempt to project Pakistan as a 5,000 years old civilization. And they say there's nothing 5,000 years old about Pakistan. It is all us. It is all ours. And so therefore, Pakistan continues to be the holy land for us. And I think we can discuss that point at some other time, and really look into the rubric and the future of that narrative. That yes, we do not relinquish our claim. We do not abdicate our connect with our foundational holy centers, sacred centers, which are situated in a country which was artificially divided or carved out. And I just like that point where he says that Marxism is a proselytizing religion. I mean, Raymond Aron, in his L'Opium des Intellectuels, Opium of the Intellectuals, he reverses the argument. He reverses the argument very well, where he says that Marxism is the opium of the intellectuals. And especially about Mahatma Gandhi's point, I think there's no true opinion on that. And this is very firmly put, and coming from someone like him, I think it lends a lot of credence to the entire argument, to the entire narrative. Linguistic oppression, I think that is very comprehensively changing. And if I go into history, Dr. Shyama Prasad Mukherjee himself, one of the first educationists in India to prepare a scientific collection, an handbook of scientific terminology in Bangla, which could be used to teach science and mathematics. And with the national education policy, that is reversing in a big way. In fact, I remember a writing of K.R. Malkani where he says that this is a new casteism. The oppression of English, it has created a new caste, and I think that is very decisively being challenged today. We are not hesitant, and we do not look upon ourselves as uneducated, whatever that means, if we are unable to talk in English. I mean, I could have spoken to you in Hindi as well, but only my Hindi you may not be able to decipher. So that's why I'm preferring English. I could speak in Sanskrit as well. Now, very quickly, in the next 4 minutes, I'll put forward a few points, because I think the final talk has been very thought-provoking, extremely thought-provoking. And I would urge that the Vivekananda International Foundation should have a center for comparative study of comparative religion and civilization, wherein these frameworks, these issues that has been discussed, and which Mr. Gurumurthy also continuously has been articulating for the last 2 decades, I think we need to have a continuous discourse on these issues. I'll just leave you with a few points. One is all ancient nations worshipped many gods. Now, when we are looking at comparative religion and Hindutva or Hinduness or Hindu religion, then can we keep this in mind? Many ancient nations worshipped many gods. And Hindu gods provided a link to all ancient gods. I mean, I'm just leaving you with certain thoughts because we don't have much time to take it into a flow. And so, therefore, there has to be a return of ancient gods. And there's a clear distinction between mysticism and theology. We were never a theocratic state. Dindal Upadhyay clearly says Dharma Rashtra is not a theocratic state. And very interestingly, now I'll come to Nehruvian secularism. When we are discussing Hindutva and comparative religion, Nehruvian secularism and Hindutva and secularism has been a point of talk, has been one of the talks here. We need to analyze, we need to confront and look at what nearly 5 decades of Nehruvian secularism has done to India. It's opposite. The main point was the Nehruvian formula was that Hindus should stand accused in every situation, no matter who the real culprit is. And a bit of that mindset could be seen when the Gita Press Gorakhpur was given the Gandhi Peace Prize, and you realized a certain section went bonkers about it. Without taking note of the fact, for the last 100 years, it was one of the world's largest publishers, having published 41.7 crore books in 14 languages, including 16.21 crore Srimad Bhagavad Gitas. This was Gorakhpur Gita Press's contribution, but you had that rubric, Hindu Rashtra. It is the vehicle of Hindu Rashtra which wants to destroy all others and steamroll them, and therefore, why Gandhi Peace Prize? I mean, if you look at the list of people who had contributed to Kalyan, the magazine of the Gorakhpur, of the Gita Press, which was edited by Hanuman Prasad Poddar, then everybody in India would have been called communal. Starting from Uzu Gandhi himself, Mahatma Ji himself wrote. Nobody of that period of consequence was out of the ambit of Kalyan. Now, we also need to look at the term multiculturalism. Europe is facing that problem. I mean, unnecessarily, European Union is worried about Manipur, but they are having a lot of existential problems. The European Union itself is in the throes of an existential crisis. I mean, we can debate that some other time. But multiculturalism, and one can give you a number of examples. For example, the German politician Thilo Sarrazin, who wrote the book Germany Abolishes Itself. I think it's just one example that I want to give. And then he was forced to resign because he says that German identity, assimilation, way of life is being challenged by indiscriminate immigration. And so I'm just leaving you with these points. Gurumurthy talks about core culture and mainstream culture. He says secular India, which is he talks about the need. He says most countries have a core or mainstream culture, shared to varying degrees by most people in their society. So Anglo-Protestantism is the American core culture, mainstream culture. And Gurumurthy says secular India, which is doing in India precisely what the deconstructionist alliance is doing in the US. And what is that? Namely, deconstructing India into a collection of subnational subordinate cultures, encouraging them and celebrating. Very interesting. Very interesting. I would like you to note, because he's the chairman of this foundation. And so, I mean, he says, celebrating diversity without emphasizing the unity and harmony aspects, thereby weakening the core or mainstream culture. I think these are points which Hindutva challenges. And I think the first challenge was put up in 1951 when the Vishwa Bharati bill was being debated. in May 1951 in the interim parliament. Lok Sabha had not yet been formed. And the debate, C.D. Deshmukh, at that time finance minister, M.B. Kamath, K.T. Shah, Dr. Shyama Prasad Mukherjee, and Maulana Azad were the participants in that debate. But why I'm referring to this is that was the first test of how independent India would respond, or how independent India would really respond to secularism or to its traditions, or to its expressions of its parampara in public sphere and space. So Tagore had put an injunction, Tagore had given a motto in the Vishwabharati constitution, in the name of the one supreme being who is Shantam Shivam Advaitam. Mandukya Upanishad, Tagore had taken from that and placed it. So please imagine, please remember that among the debate, among the issues that were being debated in the Vishwabharati bill, the government was to take over the Vishwabharati University and run it as a government institution. One of the main debate was whether Shantam Shivam Advaitam should be reflected in the act or in the schedule, or should be completely done away with. And Maulana Azad, of course, opposed it. He said, no, it has no place. C.D. Deshmukh was a little ambivalent. He said, I agree, but that, we can translate it only that Shantam Shivam Advaitam should be removed. Shyama Prasad Mukherjee says, while you put in, why have you done it? I've been asking myself. And I would appeal to Maulana Sahib to look into the matter more carefully and, if possible, revise the decision which he has taken. And in fact, Vishwabharati was to be founded, renewed as an university which would have a center for comparative study of religion, culture, art, etc. It was there it was Tagore's original founding principle. Shyama Prasad Mukherjee says, what is it that we are afraid of? Is it because we have said that ours is a secular state, we should not mention supreme being anywhere in any constitutional document? And then the debate goes on. So I think these have been very fascinating, 5 provocative, thought-provoking and provocative lectures. And I think you have given us a roadmap along which we can actually further develop this discourse, contextualize it as you have done, and come up with, I think, certain basic founding pillars for Hindutva in our times. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Ganguly, for always bringing up some unknown facets which add to our debate and understanding. And this Shantam Shivam Advaitam is a wonderful aphorism. I think we should have it here. So maybe I didn't know that this had happened, and perhaps it should rekindle the debate about these issues. In fact, we have just brought out a collection of Vedic hymns on this. On the occasion of G20, to which Prime Minister has also given a message. And this collection of hymns talks about, actually is collated under 5 major themes. One is Shanti. So this Shantam is very much there. Another is Swasti. And there is, I think, Prakriti and Nari, and one more. So 5 or 6 of these themes are there, and the Prime Minister has appreciated this. Delegates will take a copy of the book, but I do not know whether our secular government will allow that or not at this point of time. But no, my point is that these are universal ideas almost. I think who will have these problems? If you want to make it to a political point, is a different thing. But these are very universal ideas. And if it's coming from Tagore and also, I think, Mandukya Upanishad, you said? So we must इनको उभारना चाहिए इनको. So I think these lectures have done this. They have brought to the fore and some of the issues which we are going to discuss in future. And I think thank you very much, Professor Sharma. We'll continue with these discussions and debates. As you said, I think you have set the roadmap for discussions. And now let's take ourselves to the moon and enjoy. This is coming out as a book, yeah. It's come out as a book, yeah. Yeah. YouTube, it's already there. Those lectures, yeah. I think they're all there. So, no questions today. Okay.
I would like to use the word impractical. Correlated with corruption and somebody's
We will go to those things. Let us now go to the moon, please. Let's go to the moon. I think something very interesting is happening there.